We're here with the one and only Dr. Jon Dean, UC San Diego, Vitalium podcast. We're at a beautiful venue in Hillsborough, California. Going to hop into this mini DMT symposium with the best in the business, Dr. Dean. So thanks for coming up, man. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, man, of course.
So tell us a little bit about the state of DMT and where we're at in the world. Small question, man.
Yeah, just like take it slow.
Yeah, well, like let's just get into it. How did you even get interested in this topic of DMT?
Yeah, so really just death, death of a friend at a young age. That kind of sent me existential midlife crisis at 19, but I could only afford a Chevy Lumina, so wasn't able to cash in on it other than the existential spiral, so but anyways, yeah, so that was pretty tough times, just kind of put me face to face with the nature of what's going on here. I'm just kind of spinning around and trying to make a difference in the world, and life is a precarious, precious thing, a gift, if you will. And so, but a lot of anxiety came with that, to the point where it was a little debilitating, so I got on some medication, just some anti-anxiety pills, like lorazepam, I think it was. And that was gnarly stuff. I mean, so I was just like, I was a little less anxious, right? But like it was just like not really addressing kind of what was going on so much as just treating the physiological symptoms maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of through that easing my mind a little. But over that course of taking that stuff, I really just became fascinated with how a little pill could change consciousness. More subtle in that sense. Man, I didn't have a major yet in college. I was just taking like regular courses, like the prerequisites. But I was always like real into science in grade school, high school. And so it's kind of like a natural progression, I guess. And so I started taking psychology courses, and then kind of went through all the ones that I could take, and then came across abnormal psychology, and that touched on more. Oh yeah, this professor that was pretty far out guy, and yeah, I remember we would come into class, and he would be like, "Welcome to Spaceship Earth," and everyone would be like, like cracking up, but I was kind of like, all right. I was laughing too, but it was an interesting take on it. Anyway, so those courses, well, that one actually was an intimate relationship psychology course, but then that was coupled to an abnormal course with this other homie. And all that kind of got into like the overlap of biology, a little bit of chemistry. And then through that path, I found that I was really interested in like how molecules interact in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine, just the natural neurotransmitters in our brains. And right around that same time, found the book DMT, the Spirit Molecule by Rick Strassman. Read that cover to cover and was just absolutely fascinated by the fact that there's a psychedelic molecule in our bodies naturally. And this also, like right around that same time when all this happened, like, declaring a major, finding Strassman's book, taking the psychology courses, etc., having all the anxiety with the friend dying. I also had my first psychedelic experience, and so that kind of all just set me on this path of kind of understanding why does our body make naturally occurring molecules that are psychedelic if you give them in a large enough quantity.
What was your first psychedelic experience like?
It was pretty gnarly. Well, because it was, it's hard to, there's that whole back and forth with psychedelics and this, that, like what is like a dissociative, a psychedelic. But it was really from cough syrup, dude. And it was like not the greatest experience, but like, yeah, had too much cough syrup and like started tripping, right?
Like Robitussin?
Yeah. And
Lord have mercy.
I know, right? Yeah. I mean, Google Youngstown, Ohio. Okay. So not, you know, the safest thing.
Yeah.
But still, you know, it was somewhat mind manifesting, you know.
Yeah.
But then, like, having experiences with things like psilocybin and stuff like that, those were much more natural and you know, much more healing and
Yeah.
helpful down the road.
Yeah, it's super interesting because it seems as though regarding DMT, there was like a bunch of studies in like the 60s or even maybe 70s, and then there was like a big drop off in all endogenous DMT research. You have any insights regarding that?
Um, so kind of did, yeah. It kind of did, especially like in humans. I think a lot of it was just like psychedelic research in general, kind of, you know, like with the Nixon administration went kind of under the ground, under the radar. Well, and more just less focused on human administration and more focused on uh, rodent research and basic pharmacology. But I think there's still a really informative body of work throughout those years, right? Like Mark Geyer from UCSD kind of kept the torch going all them years and published hundreds of papers, you know, preclinical in rodents, and Ed Domino at the University of Michigan. Like these are just some of the people that I've interacted with or been mentored by, but there's several others, obviously. But you know, through that, it wasn't necessarily like endogenous DMT focused, but you know, it was like pharmacology on serotonin receptors and multiple neurotransmitter receptors and proteins in the brain. But Steve Barker is really the guy that kept it going through all those years. So I really think it didn't really drop off. It just kind of didn't focus on humans anymore. Because like the 60s and 70s research was more, you know, like the schizotoxin hypothesis and all that.
Yeah.
You know, which is fascinating hypothesis. It's in our bodies naturally, but none of that really, to my knowledge, kind of came to bear out, like, you know, to bear fruit. Like it was, there's just too much variability in the assays in the urine for endogenous DMT because they compared like schizophrenia to control conditions. But yeah, Steve Barker, man, he as well, you know, he took the torch on that and really and did the heavy lifting on work like looking at like can DMT kind of be stored in vesicles and you know could it possibly function like in a neurotransmitter in our bodies naturally.
Yeah. One of the, I mean, that's still kind of an ongoing speculation regarding what are the molecules driving like cases like schizophrenia or conditions like schizophrenia. And it always intrigued me how DMT was interjected into that conversation. It kind of makes sense because if it's considered a hallucinogen and people are having like hallucinogen type experiences, yeah, 1 to 1, but it seems as though DMT has like therapeutic properties, like anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective under hypoxic states. And it seems as though schizophrenia, you have chronic neuroinflammation. So I wrote a piece like years ago, stating that it's probably an opposite effect where DMT is trying to act like an autonomic repair.
I read your, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. What do you think about like what is going on? Because DMT is in our brain. People do have schizophrenia. Do you feel like there's any sort of interplay going on?
So yeah, your paper was cool, or your article. I mean, I think it's an interesting take on it, where kind of like the hallucinogenic properties of endogenous DMT. I don't want to call it a side effect necessarily, but like in things like that, you know, there's a body of evidence growing like that endogenous DMT could possibly play a role in like neuroprotection, like stroke. And you know, I've been reading some of that literature because we're working on trying to get a clinical trial going on stroke and DMT, exogenous DMT. But yeah, like you could postulate that, you know, if you have a stroke or if you're schizophrenic and that inflammation is the part of it, then maybe endogenous DMT is upregulated to counteract those effects, and it just gets to a point where that it could maybe induce some of the side effects.
It's like an overshoot.
And in stroke too, right? Like there's people that describe like hallucinations that are kind of DMT-like when they talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the attendants, Max Harding, that's going to be attending this symposium. 20-year-old kid, I believe he either has a cyst or a tumor on his pineal gland, and it seems as though he's had a lot of mystical type experiences. In the past, there's been a lot of discussion, memes regarding pineal gland DMT. Why don't you touch upon a little bit about that controversy?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's fascinating about Max.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of like Sean Thornton,
Mm-hmm.
the artist that, I mean, that had a pineal tumor and started making art that was like pretty psychedelic,
For sure.
if not like the DMT state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it all kind of came about with Rick Strassman, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where this launched. And I think because he studied melatonin, so he knew the pineal physiology quite well. Like
Mhm.
some of Rick's like early papers are about melatonin. I remember there's like one with like a marathon runners, and he was looking at melatonin levels, like the runner's high thing that now is kind of attributed to endocannabinoids. Rick was like, well, maybe it's endogenous DMT.
Yeah.
So knowing, you know, he measured melatonin because it's like easier to assay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think from that he was working on pineal based research and noted that tryptophan metabolism is playing a key role in the pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the major source of melatonin in the body. Tryptophan is converted into melatonin, and then we've known for decades that tryptophan is also converted into DMT biosynthetically, naturally in the body, in rodents and humans, and that's the starting point. And so that's like an essential amino acid, right? And I think Rick just kind of put it together. He was like, okay, well, there's the molecules that are in there that are needed. There was also some evidence that there was one of the main enzymes that was needed. It's like decarboxylase that basically gets rid of the group carboxylic acid. Not to get into too much chemistry, but that can then, you know, it's double methylated and converted. So I think he put all that together, and then some mysticism, like in his background too. You know, he was like pretty active in the Buddhist community, and noted like Descartes, like a lot of the, you know, if you look in, I'm less versed in all that, but yeah, like the pine cone, you see
Mm-hmm.
it like everywhere in
Yeah.
Eastern philosophy and whatnot. And Descartes' speculation of the pineal is I think it was Descartes, like the seat of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, Rick kind of pulled from Eastern knowledge, right? It's not just like people treat it like it's like folklore,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, it's been around for that long for a reason, I think. And scientifically speculated that maybe the pineal is making DMT.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe at things like extreme physiological events like birth, death, dreaming, which isn't extreme, but you know,
Mm-hmm.
altered states of naturally occurring altered states of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe the pineal is upregulating DMT to high levels.
Yeah. And then in 2013, there was a study published by Dr. Barker and Dr. Jima Borjigan regarding finding DMT at the pineal gland, or like what exactly took place?
Yeah. So in 2013, that was kind of what led me to the University of Michigan to work with Jimo. So Jimo Borjigan, I think Rick contacted her and said, hey, wait a second, you're doing all this pineal research. And Jimo had one of the more sophisticated setups in the world where she was measuring in a rodent pineal gland with a probe, this little thin, like couple millimeter probe that is inserted surgically into the pineal gland in a living rat.
Mm-hmm.
Also samples like some of the visual cortex just because of the way the pineal is. In the rat, it's like kind of on top of the head. It's closer to like the reptile, you know. It's under the skull,
Yeah.
like the dura and whatnot, but it's you know, it's sitting on top, whereas ours is like buried.
Oh, I didn't know that the rat's pineal gland is sitting higher.
Yeah,
Oh,
you can see it, like not all the time, but like when we were doing surgeries, it's a lot of times you can see it when you just like remove the skull. Yeah,
Fascinating.
but so Jimo's setup was that she was continuously sampling with pumping this like artificial cerebral spinal fluid with like an anesthesiology, like an anesthetic pump, the same thing that they do with surgeries to administer drugs.
Yeah.
She is infusing this salt solution basically into the brain. And this has been done for decades prior, I think. It dates back to like the 90s, I believe. And coming out, collecting in little tubes, the essentially like the extracellular fluid like in the brain. And then just doing like some bread and butter analytical chemistry with high performance liquid chromatography. And it's just like the most up-to-date version of like thin plate chromatography, where you take like a known amount of a molecule and it basically is going to like travel on a column, like dissolves like kind of deal. The ones we were using, I believe, were like super non-polar, and then you have like a polar elutant, and then you build a standard curve. So you just, like we were building curves with like melatonin, what GMO was before I got there for this 2013 paper.
Yeah.
Building curves for like melatonin, serotonin, acetylserotonin. Again, these really beautiful printouts of what the rat brain looks like across the sleep-wake cycle, particularly, well, not particularly, but in the pineal gland. These really beautiful circadian curves of like during the dark cycle, like when that's kicking in, like serotonin production starts to decrease. It funnels into the melatonin pathway. And so Rick hit her up and was like, wow, like you have this set up, like, can we get some of those samples? Because my colleague Steve Barker has this really like super in-depth panel that can, he was coupling it to what's called mass spectrometry, mass spec too, like MS. You see in like the literature, it's like HPLC mass spec. And it's like an additional layer of like long story short, they like blast the molecule with it like breaks it apart and the fragments. It's far out stuff, but it's real, and it's used in like analytical, like forensic laboratories and stuff like that. Anyway, so which Steve was doing non-coincidentally, I believe, he was like testing like horse horse urine.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
For DMT?
No, but just for like his setup, like a lot of his funding he was looking for molecules that were like illicit, like performance enhancing.
Yeah.
That's kind of like how he got things moving, I guess, or kept his funding. But yeah, so he could look at DMT, I think N-methyltryptamine, which is like right before DMT, tryptophan. I forget everything they look for in that paper. There might have been bufotenine in there as well. I think he was looking for that as well. And then like the other DMT metabolites, like indoleacetic acid, DMT N oxide. So very, very high level, like sophisticated. And then so they analyzed those samples that GMO sent just from the waking, moving rats. And the goal was to just identify if, they would get a peak in the places that their column was set up to detect. And that's how they found DMT in the pineal gland for the first time. They built like a standard curve at Steve's lab. And then they just placed the concentration of the sample in line with the curve. And basically you get these like peaks based on like when the molecule elutes off the column. They're called retention times.
Yeah.
My chemistry is so rusty, man. You're making me, I'm probably saying it all wrong, but I think it's right. It's been about, what, like almost, not that long, about 6 years. But anyways, yeah, so that's how they found DMT in the rat brain.
Yeah, and it seemed like the memes took off after that because there was a lot of speculation before that, and then the internet had the data, some data to support the memes, and then
well, the thing about that paper was, and that's what we did to follow up, was the probe was like a sagittal. It was like going through so that it was sampling from the visual cortex also. So it wasn't entirely clear if the pineal was producing it or if it was like just diluted. You know what I mean? Like maybe it was in the cortex, but it was clear it was there.
Yeah.
So then that's the work that she was doing then with Rick, and I emailed Rick like when I came back to. Well, that's another story. But when I went to get my master's degree. We
Mhm.
won't dive into my weirdo past, but I went to Michigan to work on that project. And then our goal, which became the 2019 paper, was to see if we could, in single cells in the area of the probe, quantify the two biosynthetic enzymes that are known to be capable of making DMT in the brain. Well, so naturally, but we wanted to see if they were in the same cells in the area of the probe.
Mhm.
So we looked in the pineal gland and we looked in the visual cortex, amongst other places.
Yeah.
But our rationale was that if we saw protein expression or like the mRNA for the two enzymes, INMT and AADC, the decarboxylase and the methyltransferase enzyme, then it would really increase the likelihood that endogenous DMT was being synthesized in the area, especially because we found the molecule with the HPLC microdialysis set up in the area.
Yeah.
And so that was part of it. And then the other part was we had a really skilled surgeon. Shout out to Tae Chung. That's my homie. Hope he's doing well. I'm sure he's watching this.
What's up, Tae Chung?
There's no doubt in my mind he's watching this.
Beautiful.
Anyways, he was capable of removing the pineal from the rat. And then the question was, if we take the pineal out, do we still see DMT?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't, then that means the pineal is it's necessary for DMT biosynthesis.
Mm-hmm.
So when we removed the pineal, we still saw DMT, but
At the pineal region, or like
in the visual cortex.
in the visual cortex.
I mean, it was still sampling from the region where the pineal was.
Yeah.
But the pineal was completely taken out, like dissected out.
Yanked it out.
Yeah. But we also saw co-localization of the two biosynthetic enzymes in both the pineal and the visual cortex.
Uh-huh.
So I think this goes back to like the controversy thing you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people took that to mean that the pineal gland doesn't make DMT, but that's not what that result suggests.
Yeah.
It suggests the pineal gland isn't necessary for making DMT.
Mm-hmm.
We actually saw a slight increase in DMT when the pineal was removed,
Mm-hmm.
which makes that like what you're talking about with pineal tumor. There's a case study where they found someone that was having hallucinations with the tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they removed it, like I think they like increased like for a little bit right after that and then like tapered off.
Mm.
So who knows?
Yeah, it seems tricky, right? It kind of is counterintuitive, but we got to do more research and sort it all out. That was a pivotal paper. The other aspect of it is that you found DMT to be at similar levels as serotonin, which everybody knows is a major neurotransmitter. You know, there's a lot of discourse regarding serotonin, and then we have a psychedelic that's produced at similar levels. Pretty groundbreaking finding, man.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. It's just, doing the stuff that motivates me. And then,
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because originally, you said you got kind of interested in DMT based on the death of a friend. I assume maybe there's some overlap with the whole near-death experience, but then to find out that, DMT is actually seems, at least in the rat brain, is produced 24/7. Seems like 24/7, right?
So hopefully, I think Michigan's following up on that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, so our resolution was not the greatest, like our sampling time period, like temporal resolution.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting samples every 15 to 30 minutes, which was building really beautiful curves for things like tryptophan and melatonin, like phase curves for the circadian rhythms across like light-dark cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But for the endogenous DMT, it was kind of all over the place. There was like no really clear pattern.
Okay.
And I know that, and maybe you could comment on it, with your activity in the donor space and whatnot. That Dinesh Paul at University of Michigan is trying to follow up on those studies, but have a sampling window that's smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also doing some stuff, I think, with sleep deprivation to kind of increase REM. REM sleep in a rat is like very short. It's like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea is, it's like maybe we didn't have the resolution to pick up on things. So one of the easiest hypothesis is that endogenous DMT might play a role in dreaming. because DMT states can sometimes have a dream-like quality. Um, and dream states, can be the same. Like they can be very surreal sometimes, especially like if you're like lucid, right? Lucid dreaming, very psychedelic, very surreal. So yeah, maybe the minute-to-minute sampling window will be able to, they'll allow them to see if there's an increase in DMT endogenously when a rat's having like REM sleep, or maybe pick up on some like sleep phases, like changes. But yeah, to answer your question, it seems like in our data at least, which wasn't set up to answer that question really, the dreaming question anyways, but was set up to answer like the circadian question.
Yeah.
It seems like it's made all day.
Yeah.
Like night, like throughout the course of sleep and wake.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
not like
really preliminary data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's early, but
The national study will hopefully weigh in.
Yeah, so it's definitely seems like DMT is not just produced and like we haven't even measured for dreaming, but your research also indicated that it seemed as though it could be correlated with the near-death experience a bit. It increased like what 600% in the visual cortex.
Yeah, so yeah, it was upwards. I think the highest reading we saw. So we were sampling throughout the euthanization. Just unfortunately, with rodent studies, you have to euthanize the animal at the end of the study. But we got permission from the animal oversight committee to continue measuring. And so GMO had published a paper a few years prior showing this like surge of neurotransmitter changes. Not everything just like went up. I think melatonin didn't, so it wasn't just like the brain was like dumping out every neurotransmitter that was in it. But seems like it might be like a regulated thing. So they saw like really huge increases in serotonin, which we also saw in our 2019 study at cardiac arrest. And then the DMT went upwards of 11-fold, if I remember. Yeah, so, but it was way lower than serotonin. Serotonin is going up like, I think it was like several hundred nanomolar.
Yeah.
And then DMT was like maybe like 50 at the most, something like that, 50 nanomolar.
But you also had a different study where they were doing minute-by-minute measurement at time of cardiac
Yeah,
arrest.
GMO did. Yeah, after the original, right, yeah. That study actually was minute to minute, the one I talked about. Ours was every 15. So we didn't really capture like the dying brain like she did.
So there's a possibility that if you did a replication study minute by minute for DMT, you'd see like a huge surge.
Could be. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Gotta wait and see, man. There's also an interesting study taking place at Michigan regarding LSD and potential effects on endogenous psychedelic system. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the like an endogenous psychedelic system makes a lot of sense because there's a well-established endocannabinoid system, a well-established endogenous opioid system. So we know that when you take a molecule like an opioid or an opiate, a medication or an opioid, that it's interacting with that system. And there's molecules in your body that naturally relieve pain. And like if you injure yourself, you fall and hurt yourself, like that stuff kicks in.
Yeah.
And they alter consciousness. And same with endogenous cannabinoids. And we know that when you take like when people smoke cannabis or, however the kids are doing it now, it is interacting with your endocannabinoid system to mediate the effects of the drug. So it makes a lot of sense because serotonin really isn't psychedelic, like per se, right? Like MDMA is not a psychedelic in the classical sense, right? It's psychoactive.
Yeah.
So what could possibly be involved? And endogenous DMT, or not just DMT. There's all these other molecules, as you well know. A lot of them are DMT related, like 5-MeO DMT. That's pretty clearly also endogenous. Bufotenin, which is like I think 5-HO DMT. That's also endogenous.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very likely, I think, that more research will uncover a role for all those molecules and maybe mediating some of the effects of exogenously administered psychedelics.
Yeah, I got you, man. And then bufotenin is an interesting one because there's not a lot of research regarding it. There's not a lot of reports of people even utilizing it for psychedelic effects. So it seems like a little bit maybe controversial regarding what it actually does.
Wait, what is, sorry?
Bufotenin?
Oh, bufotenin, yeah.
Yeah, like I haven't seen like anybody saying, "Yeah, I smoked bufotenin and this was the effect,"
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
So
Yeah, it's like I think it's just like in some of the like frog, like the toad. I don't
Yeah.
say frog, the toad. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of like an entourage or something like that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Which I don't know what the hell the effect is, but it's interesting because it seems as though that DMT is found more easily in the periphery than the regular DMT. But
Oh, really?
well, it's at least people can find it regularly in, I think, like urine, right? And it doesn't seem like regular DMT is found in that, but hard to say. Anyway, switching gears, you left University of Michigan. You put out the groundbreaking study in 2019. What are you working on now?
I'm retired.
Oh, that's beautiful,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Just one big bomb and just call it quits.
Yeah. I'm down in TJ.
Break out the whip. You must get him back in the lab.
So you caught me at an interesting time, right? I'm a postdoc, but hopefully by Friday I will be on the track of some sort of assistant professorship. Yeah, which will match my beard and sweater, you know. Yeah, but so what am I working on now? So a couple things.
Nothing big.
What brought me to UCSD for my postdoc was I wanted to get out of the rodent research. You know, I see the utility in it, and especially for like medicine, you know. But yeah, I was just like starting to weigh on my soul a little bit. And so the opportunity I got at University of California, San Diego with Professor Fadel Zaidan.
The classy Faddle.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's keeps it classy. It's San Diego. You have to. Yeah. So Fadel gave me the opportunity to work in his lab and train me for fMRI clinical trials, because that's what I wanted to get into. And a huge motivating factor of that was not only wanting to get out of the rodent research, also to work in the clinic and like not just sort of be like scientifically cute or, you know, just quenching academic curiosity. And I mean, you know, there's that element too, like the neuroscience exploration, which I'm also getting like kind of a half and half approach with, but clinical research that could possibly help people that are suffering like immediately. So, and then there's also a mindfulness community. Like Fadel is really the guy for mindfulness meditation research, and I had some other offers, but it was more like to go to human research with psychedelics, but it was more just like rooted in psychedelics only. And I really felt that thread of mindfulness was important. You know, and to kind of kick it back. I mean, especially now, like with where things are going, where psychedelics are becoming a little more mainstream in Western world and a little bit more accepted. You know, I feel like education is super important. And then having that mindfulness piece, you know, yeah, to touch on like the Robitussin thing, right? It's like, you know, the stuff can be dangerous and like harmful, and if kids are being stupid, like it can be a problem. So,
Somebody knows from experience, people.
yeah. But like, so having that mindfulness thread was important to me because I felt like you're not just giving someone a pill and expecting it to work, but you're really coupling like a whole body approach. And you know, Fadel's work was showing that mindfulness was acting for pain relief, like independent the endogenous opioid system. And we followed up on some of that, you know, when I came out there. And so that's fascinating work.
Yeah, you guys had an interesting finding regarding the differences between men and women, right? And how they modulate
Yeah. Sex differences. Exactly. Yeah, right. So we had all this data from meditators, both getting experimental pain, like this thermal heat stimulus on their calf, and then like also getting an induction, this technique where we induce some of their back pain by literally just like compressing their nerve. Like when they're laying on the table, we like raise their leg.
Torture.
Yeah, it's a consented torture.
Yeah.
And then what we found was that mindfulness is capable of alleviating that, both the endogenous pain and the exogenous pain. And then we were administering in like a crossover arm naloxone, which is an opioid antagonist, right? And the idea is it's blocking the body's natural opioidergic response. So if the effects of meditation were to go away, the idea, like when you have naloxone on board, like the pain relieving effects, then you would make the case that, okay, it's mediated maybe in part by the body's natural opioids, which is an important distinction for mindfulness research, because things like placebo expectation, they do engage opioids to relieve pain. That's kind of been shown. And so with mindfulness, what we found, when we were looking at just back pain, we didn't really see that sex difference pop out. But we saw that mindfulness basically still relieved pain when naloxone on board. But in the heat pain, like the external pain, and it could just be we need to have larger sample sizes or whatnot, because there was a medical student that discovered this like in the data. Mm-hmm. She was like really interested in sex differences and was like, look at this. And we were like, whoa. And in the cohort, the male cohort, basically the mindfulness, it seems like the females are engaging something else, mm-hmm. right? Because in the males it was overturned with naloxone on board, and in the females it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, well, maybe they're engaging like endocannabinoids or something along the lines of that, mm-hmm. to relieve the pain.
Yeah.
But that brought me out there, man. It was really to have that holistic approach, and we're hopeful that we'll start some work leading a study on mindfulness and psychedelic therapy to couple. And then the bulk of my work my training was leading one of the first fMRI studies on chronic pain and psychedelics. Mm. It might be the first, actually. Anyways, it was in people that have phantom limb pain. Mm. It was just a small pilot study. It's really more for like safety, because people with phantom limb pain, most of them have had an amputation, and so it can alter blood pressure. Mm. And so the FDA was rightfully concerned about that. So it was like a lot of just like, can we test this? Is it going to be safe? And we found in a small cohort that it is. But naturally, the question is it going to relieve their pain? So phantom pain, like somebody that's just had an amputation, within a few hours of the anesthetic wearing off, it's like 90% of people or something develop this phantom pain. Mm. And it feels basically like the limb is still there. And so 90% of people feel the limb's still there, sorry. Yeah. And then I think it's like 60 to 70% of those people, mm-hmm. start to have this like excruciating pain in that phantom limb. So it's not like pain at the site of the amputation, mm-hmm. which is also it's something
like the hand that's not there.
Yeah, exactly. They feel like their arm or their leg that used to be there.
Yeah.
And
wow.
It's no longer there, obviously, but they feel the pain in that. Mm-hmm. In the hallucination or whatever you want to call it of the missing limb.
Yeah.
And this is something too that's like people that are born without a limb, so not that have had like a traumatic amputation. Mm-hmm. Like if someone was born, there's like a case study of someone born quadriplegic, mm-hmm. and still is like, I feel like what you would describe as like a limb, because like feel something extending past like where my wheelchair is and whatnot. Wow. So yeah, it's like it's not just that the limb is removed. It's not necessarily just trauma based, right? It seems like in the brain, there's a representation of a limb that's still there. Because mm-hmm. people have scanned with fMRI, and they've said, because a lot of people can still have some sort of voluntary control over it. Mm-hmm. You know, even in our study, I've heard people say that, you know, they went to, like after first, their amputation was still new after like the first couple of days, they'd wake up, get out of bed and go to step down and almost fall over because they felt it there still.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, the people that can move it, there are a few studies now. The most recent was like a Nature Medicine paper, you know, like a mega journal.
Mm-hmm.
They did a longitudinal study where they scanned people's brains before they were set to have an amputation, and they had them move their arms and their hands. And then they brought in right after the amputation, and they had them move this
They looked
hand,
at the brain.
and if they were able to move the phantom. Yeah, and they looked at the brain.
And then what
And
happened?
they did that. They followed some people for up to 5 years, I think. And what they saw was that the phantom movement registered in the exact same area as the intact limb did
Wow.
when, you know, from prior to the amputation.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked basically identical to the limb that was intact already. And this persisted for years. So for some reason, the brain's just like wired to have the percept of a limb.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, we've been doing a scanning study at our Center for Psychedelic Research, fMRI based. The preliminary data are exciting. The paper's under review, hopefully be published soon.
Mm-hmm.
We show in like the very small cohort that it's safe. So it's 5 people that got just psilocybin, 4 people that got placebo niacin, which is basically like it's in like Red Bull and energy drinks, the B vitamin that flushes you and makes you kind of feel like the kind of come up phase of a psychedelic experience. And the phantom pain reductions and the site of the amputation reductions, like 4 out of 5 people had sustained reductions in their phantom pain at 2 and 4 weeks. And then 5 out of 5 in the residual in pain.
And there's just one dose.
Yeah, after a single dose.
Wow.
So again, really small sample sizes. So we're currently doing a larger study to see if that's gonna be, it's gonna be borne out in the larger population.
Do you have any hypothesis on like what's leading to the alleviation of pain?
Well, that's why we're looking in the brain. Yeah, we do. So the preliminary data in the brain shows, one of the things that it shows is similar to what we see with meditation. We saw one of the mechanisms that could predict a potential pain relief is a decoupling of like the brain's self network, the default mode network. And this has been known, the psychedelics impact that, processes in that for a long time now. Things like depression, like Cara Harris's group with psilocybin has looked at changes in the default mode in correlation with depression. And so, yeah, what we saw was a decoupling of that egocentric default mode network, basically involved in like everyday kind of mindless sort of tasking. It's like active and hyperactive in things like chronic pain. A decoupling of that from the thalamus, which is like the sensory gate.
Okay.
And there are studies in phantom pain that they've microstimulated the thalamus. They had the ability, I forget, maybe it was like epilepsy or something, but they had stimulators in the thalamus, and they would stimulate it in the people that had an amputation, and they were able to induce like the feeling of the limb and the pain, like flare it up. Yeah, so it's like very centralized. So we think it's happening kind of like in the brain mostly, like in the cortex. But also, like, so that representation of the limb is one thing. We didn't test that in our first go at it. But the decoupling of like the sensory gate from the self gate, and seeing that in mindfulness makes a lot of sense too, because it's almost like that's like what we tell them to do when they meditate. Like if you have a sensory experience come up or any adverse thoughts or affective thoughts, you just decouple from them and go back to your breath. Don't be judgmental. And we see the same thing kind of coming out in that literature, like the default mode networks deactivating and decoupling from thalamus. But I think the like somatosensory cortex, where the missing limb lights up, I think that'll be a target too. So in our newer work, we're having people do a task in the scanner that have them focus on the phantom, basically. to see if there's pre-post changes that predict the pain reduction.
Yeah, this whole area of pain is fascinating. One of my partners here at Vitalium, Albert Chen, he's a Qigong healer. I think you met him before. And, Qigong has been around for thousands of years. People still don't understand what it is. They don't understand what force is being generated between practitioner and the receiver. Still a long ways to go to quantify it. But it does seem as though there's some sort of effect on pain, whether it's placebo or something is actually happening. I lean more towards something's actually happening. The question that I have is, do you think that there's the possibility that there's overlap regarding the effects of reduction of pain and what's going on in the brain to alleviate pain from mindfulness and things like psilocybin, where there's maybe some sort of plasticity effect being induced from like this energy healing modality? Is that like a rational way to approach the alleviation of pain from Qigong?
Yeah, so I think when I was talking to Albert last time, we got into that conversation a little bit. I think the hyperscanning studies are going to be really interesting. And it'll touch at that question because it'll give you like a mechanism of what's happening. But it kind of plays into the phantom thing, like the mirror neurons, which is like a Ramachandran thing, at UCSD. And, he was working with phantom pain for a long time too with the mirror therapy. But there's this whole known, like well-established phenomenon of social transfer of pain, right? So I kind of view it maybe from like that's a good starting point. No, I'm not saying that it's like necessarily the same thing. I don't write off the hundreds, if not thousands of years of that practice as just, being something that's mirror neurons or whatever. It could be a force that's yet not understood yet. But I think those types of studies are a good start for neuroscience to scratch because they're well-established protocols for things like the social transfer of pain. So for instance, like people in our study, sometimes just like having them come in and ask them about their pain would flare up their phantom pain. And in phantom limb pain and other pain syndromes, like, but particularly in phantom pain, just like viewing another person in pain will exacerbate their pain. And, in these studies, there's like a pretty established thing with like, it's like the anterior cingulate and the insula. These are like well-known broad pain producing or like pain processing regions. And in the social transfer of pain, like that's what you see. You see mediation through these neural networks. And then the hyperscanning is interesting because they're basically seeing like if like when someone's doing that, like is there some sort of synchronicity. The EEG is even more interesting. I'm less versed in the EEG these days. Like the fMRI is super interesting too, but with the EEG, you're getting more like at the temporal frequency.
Yeah, I think they're doing EEG and heart rate to see if
it's cool.
both organs synchronize. And I think Rick might be measuring for changes in DMT.
Rick Harris?
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think it's going to be a needle mover for that field of energy healing to see if they can quantify some of those aspects.
Yeah.
That whole social contagion thing seems to be sprouting up a lot. I came across a paper recently of like autistic people gravitating to other autistic people because they synchronize easier. Synchronization.
Wow, whoa. You'll have to send me that.
Yeah. And then there's like a lot of reports of people that have been caregivers for people with Alzheimer's getting Alzheimer's disease, right? Alzheimer's is not supposed to be transferable, but it seems like this social transference of states of being, even like, physiological changes is more than we think.
There's caretakers. There's like a trend in caretakers getting Alzheimer's.
That have taken care of people with Alzheimer's.
Whoa.
I mean, there's even like depressive contagion, right? Have you heard about that recently? Like if you're
not so much.
Yeah, like you can, if you're around depressed people, you can synchronize with them and start to get depressed.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. The Alzheimer's thing's a little trippier though.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
Like a real statistical.
At least it's been reported. I know, Mr. Scientist, I got to make sure the date is right, but I've heard it quite extensive.
But you do gotta report, You got to listen to people's reports.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what.
that Domino said that a long time ago.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you know about Ed's story.
No.
Well, Ed basically implemented ketamine in the clinic
Okay.
at the University of Michigan, and he was also at like in Detroit, for a while there.
Yeah.
But he was instrumental in getting ketamine in the clinic, and then so he was also a practicing physician, and he would see people that would be like, oh yeah, like they knew he like worked with ketamine, and they were like, yeah, I did a bunch of ketamine and it like helped my depression. And I remember him saying, he was like, Jesus Christ, you can't be doing that, like you gotta stop doing that. And he's like, that's not good for you. And but then he was like, several decades later, he was like, John, I wish I would have listened to him, because like then it became established, like through the literature,
Yeah.
and through the science and the medicine, that it can be beneficial to depression. So it is important to take people for their word. And
Yeah, a little
not
bit,
just,
man.
like, be like, where's the data? Data. Data.
Okay, and you have a couple other big projects, man. We touched
I
upon
didn't
some
touch on
important
it.
projects that you've already been a
Well,
part
that's
of.
some of the more preclinical stuff.
Yeah.
Well, not preclinical in the sense like rodents, but like basic science. Yeah, well, I mean, that was the driver to get me out there too, to UCSD, was to get in, like, to see if we can take some of this endogenous DMT stuff out of rodents and into humans, and figure out a way to non-invasively map DMT in a human body, be it with more developed or advanced analytical techniques for blood and urine, cerebrospinal fluid, saliva, or imaging with like PET, or even non-invasive things, which is what we've been working on with MRS. So that's a big one. And then we've been developing and working with the FDA, et cetera, to launch a continuous infusion study for DMT. Like Imperial College and Basel have done, multiple other groups. I think it was like Algernon was involved with work doing 6-hour infusions. So it's kind of a mix of things. Like, it is scientific curiosity of like, what is it that DMT is doing to the brain? Like, how do people report these profound experiences, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so like, people that have had like a full-fledged DMT experience say it's like one of the most like profound top 5, like akin to like a birth or a death in their lives, So these are like really powerful experiences. And then there's people that have had near-death experiences that have also done DMT, and there's papers on that, and they're saying, hey, there's some similarities here. So it's like very important to, again, listen to people, and it's like a huge neuroscience question. Like, these are states that really define what it is to be a human being at the grandest stage, birth, death,
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And then the idea behind it originally was DMT dissipates so rapidly, the effects wear off so rapidly. Is there a way to prolong that? And so this is like Andrew Gallimore, Rick Strassman, in like the mid-2000s, like 2015 or 16, came up with this hypothesis paper of how you could do this just with like an infusion pump and like the PK from some of Rick's data.
Yeah.
Like how the blood, like how it goes away in the blood, the DMT plasma. And so then Imperial College was pretty sure they weren't the first, but they were the first to really take their time and try to
Shout out to
dial it
Anton
in.
Bilson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There was like a German group in I think it's like 2005 or something.
Yeah, they did ketamine and DMT extended, right?
Right. But yeah, so I mean, my thoughts on it are it's really like, could maybe be precision medicine that, we're seeing in our clinic very beneficial effects, at least preliminarily, for chronic pain and psilocybin. But you give somebody psilocybin and all bets are off for 6 hours, and then that's a tax on the system too.
Yeah.
So we do definitely view it as a protocol that, you can create a little more equity, maybe. Like, you can get people more into the clinic. It saves time. It saves like burden on physicians and nurses.
Yeah.
And you could turn the pump off and dial it in, you know. So if you, like, I'm not necessarily a proponent for like someone has to come into the clinic and get like a hero dose. I think that's, I mean, the data do suggest that like a big dose is like most beneficial, but I think it's like not teased out enough. Everyone just assumes that. I feel like lighter doses and lower doses are going to also be beneficial, especially when you get into things that are a little bit more, like for instance, stroke, right? So there's a 6-hour infusion process that was published with the intent to treat things like stroke. Because there's preclinical data showing that if you give a rat a stroke and then you administer DMT for the next hour right after that, you could decrease the infarct size. You can decrease like pro-inflammatory markers, increase anti-inflammatory markers, expedite motor recovery. And so the idea here is this probably has nothing to do with the psychedelic effects. It's probably more like we talked about before, maybe endogenous DMT is a little out of tune in certain people. And, you know, if you could kind of augment that by just boosting it a little bit and administer a dose that isn't even psychedelic. So that's where this technique comes in, I think, because it's precision medicine. You can also turn the pump off if someone's having like a super adverse experience. Whereas you have to administer a bunch of medication now for like psilocybin LSD studies. You know, so I think it's going to create equity and safety.
Yeah, I think your point regarding the potentiality of utilizing lower doses and even potentially mixing it with other modalities, like maybe a little breath work, maybe some light and sound, and then like you said, you can turn off the drip anytime. It kind of gives people like a sense of safety, right, going in.
Because dude, it's not going to be for everyone. Just like medicine is, like certain medications aren't for everyone. So it's like, it's important to not be like super overzealous with it. I think for the most part, people are not that way, at least like in the science community, you know, which is good. But,
No, it's fascinating work you're doing, man. I think you're obviously at top of the class in this space, and we need to see more. So we definitely got to find more support for your lab. It's very important. One other thing I wanted to touch on was there was a study published late last year. It seemed to replicate your 2019 study of sorts. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
yeah, Nick Linos, man. So Nick was working, well, right before I left Michigan, I was working on helping them get some of their assays up. Like we were working with 5-MeO DMT and DMT in a analytical chemistry lab. This dude, Robert Kennedy. Not the same.
Not the muscle man.
Yeah, not the same. Yes. Yeah, no, Kid Rock wasn't in the lab ever. Yeah, so with that, we were getting basically like when GMO started to phase out of the endogenous DMT work, like all her equipment like was sold off and whatnot. So we started to get this work off the ground, and then when I left, they like really launched the study and took it into full effect. And what they wanted to do, well, they did a couple things. They administered DMT, but they also focused on endogenous DMT. And there are a couple cool findings in that paper, but the biggest one was obviously in terms of endogenous DMT, that they replicated what we saw, and they did it with a higher level of scientific rigor, because they also had that mass spec involved. You know, so it's a little bit more sophisticated than just the HPLC. It's like a double sort of confirmation.
Like redundancy.
Yeah.
I got you.
And so what they saw was levels of DMT very similar to what we saw in the visual cortex, but they saw it in the frontal and in the parietal. And then they measured serotonin like we did, but they also measured dopamine. We didn't measure dopamine, and they saw in some of the rats, I think maybe even the overall effect was that DMT was higher than dopamine in parietal and frontal cortex. So it suggests that DMT is all throughout the rat brain, right? Which, if it translates to humans, it's suggesting there's a pretty clear indication that there's a physiological role for it, whether it's neuroprotection or it could be involved in mood. right? Like depression, maybe there's a reason. Like Nature just does publication with DMT administered in some cases, like I think naive people. Same with the stroke, like the 6-hour infusion study was some people had never had DMT before. So people are tolerating these approaches, like with the safety, being vetted by the FDA, et cetera.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going in a very positive direction in that regard. But with Nick's study, man, it really is saying like there's a signal there.
Yeah.
Like maybe something like GABA that it's like a gain knob, glutamate GABA.
Yeah.
In the brain naturally. And then they also saw that when you administer DMT, like a big exogenous bolus, they were doing microdialysis, so they were measuring like serotonin efflux, and they saw that, which is like a marker of like a neurotransmitter can do that. And then they saw retention for several samples after. I think they were doing 15-minute samples. And they saw DMT like stayed stored in the brain. Well, stored isn't maybe the best word for it. They didn't quite show that, but like it suggests that maybe it's stored because they're seeing the basically elevated levels of DMT, for a long time after they're done and with the infusion.
That's fascinating because in the human studies, when they did the IV, it clears out of the blood quick.
Yeah.
But there's a potentiality that is still circulating in the brain for longer.
Well, so yeah, I mean, what it could be is that there's like a mechanism in place for it to be taken up and whatnot.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Maybe it's just a breakdown thing now that I think about it, because it is extracellular that they're measuring, right? But for some reason it's sticking around longer.
Yeah.
In the brain versus in the blood.
Yeah.
I wish they had measured both. That would have been really interesting. But
a while back, you mentioned speaking with the group out of Switzerland that was doing extended. Was it Switzerland?
Basel, yeah.
Basel, yeah. And you mentioned that because you're going to be doing the extended stay DMT, and they've been doing it the last couple of years, and you mentioned the entity phenomena. And what was the reaction?
Oh yeah, they kind of.
What is this entity?
They thought it was like a cultural phenomenon. Yeah. That's kind of what they thought.
Like it's just Americans reporting that.
Yeah. Well, not just maybe Americans, but it was the Switzerland people in their Switzerland study were not reporting it.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. It was it was an alarming reaction because it's a pretty common theme. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. They're like one of the leading groups in the world doing this work. So should definitely take into account what they're saying. But yeah, it was just jarring. I wasn't expecting them to say that. Yeah, we asked them about that on the call.
Yeah,
and we were like, did you look for, like Imperial College, like literally asked like, rate your like entity experience from 0 to 10. It's like crude, but but it, something. And they were just like, no. And it's like, well, then how do you know? Like, if someone had that, no one told us. It's like, okay. But yeah, they've been great. They were very helpful and helping us dial in our dosing approach. They've done like heavy lifting with like the safety data, the cardiovascular effects and adverse events, and they've been nothing but like supportive, like open science. Yeah,
that's awesome, man.
It is.
Yeah, this DMT field is so wide ranging, especially when you delve into all the topics we've been going into regarding endogenous and the nuances of it all. And there's other people like Andres Gomez, who is focused on, hyperspace and mapping out hyperspace. So I think we'll probably have him on in a couple months. And it's just such a good counterbalance, the fundamentals, like the stuff that you're working on. And then, he's really out there trying to map what's going on in that space. So
the experience is quite important.
Yeah. Yeah.
No my lens is much different. You're right. So it's good that you need.
Yeah, it's good to have both you guys, in the network, like really mapping it out on a fundamental, basic human level that's very much needed, and then growing from there. And he's starting from like hyperspace, trying to sort all that out. So
But Dre's, he's a brilliant dude, though.
yeah, he's on point with it. So yeah, man, fascinating talk. Thanks so much for taking the time, man.
Of course. Thanks
If
for having me on and all the support and everything and what
yeah,
you're doing, dude, because you're blazing the trail, man.
hey, man, we all are, right? We're here to really pretty much decipher the human potential, the chemistry driving it all, even moments of insight, like the film that we're working on with Bruce Damer. So fascinating time to be alive, to get grounded perspectives on some of these more slightly esoteric topics. But it's great to have brilliant, ballsy scientists like you on the test.
Thank you.